Yeah, it feels like you're pulling books out of thin air.
It does.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So yeah, today's chapter is chapter 22, Out of Thin Air, and we've got the Forsaken symbol, four-clover snake. Okay, we definitely have a Forsaken here at the end. We can debate which one.
Yeah, but this is more about the Forsaken plot to have an assassin pop out of thin air and murder people than it is about the Forsaken per se. It's the out of thin air part that we're really focusing on.
Well, I feel like the whole symbol focuses really on the Slayer POV at the end of the chapter, right? It's got the Forsaken, it's got him popping out of thin air. Although I guess, in a lot of ways, Fane does kind of pop out of thin air in this chapter too.
Right, yes. Yeah, Fane does definitely come out of and vanish into thin air with the same kind of lethal invisibility that Slayer then displays later. That is very true.
The Amhara market was one of 3 in Farmading, where foreigners were allowed to trade. But despite the name, the huge square had nothing of the look of a market. No market stalls or displays of merchandise. A few mounted riders, a handful of closed sedan chairs carried by brightly livered bearers, and the occasional coach with its window curtains drawn, made their way through a sparse, yet bustling crowd that might have been seen in any large city. Most were well wrapped in their cloaks against the morning winds blowing in off the lake that surrounded the city, and it was the cold that made them hurry more than any urgent business. Around the square, as at the city's other 2 strangers' markets, the tall stone houses of bankers rubbed shoulders with slate-roofed stone inns where the foreign merchants stayed, and blocky windowless stone warehouses where their goods were stored, all jumbled in among stone stables and stone-walled wagon yards. Farmading was a city of stone walls and slate roofs. This time of year, the inns were a quarter full at best, and the warehouses and wagon yards emptier than that. Come spring and the full revival of trade, though, merchants would pay triple for whatever space they could find. A round marble pedestal in the center of the square held a statue of Savion Amahara, 2 spans tall and proud in fur-trimmed robes of marble, with elaborate marble chains of office around her neck. Her marble face was stern beneath the first council's jeweled marble diadem, and her right hand firmly gripped the hilt of a marble sword, its point resting between her slippered feet, while her raised left hand aimed a warning marble finger towards the Tyr gate, some 3/4 of a mile away. Farmading depended on merchants from Tyr and Ilion and Camelin, but the High Council was ever wary of foreigners and their corrupting outland ways. One of the steel-capped street guards in a leather coat sewn with overlapping square metal plates and a golden hand on the left shoulder stood below the statue, using a long, limber pole to frighten away black-winged gray pigeons. Savion Amahara was one of the 3 most revered women in Farmading's history, though none was known very far beyond the lake's shores. 2 men from the city were mentioned in every history of the world, though it had been called Aren Mador when one was born, and Fel Moriena for the other. But Farmading did its fervent best to forget Rowland Darksplane and Urian Strongbow. In a real way, those 2 men were why Rand was in Farmading. I think that gives us a good setup.
Yeah.
And if I have to say marble one more time, I think I might lose my marbles. Like, everything in that paragraph, like, they described her, and it was her marble dress, her marble finger, her marble hand.
I wonder what kind of stone is nearby for quarrying.
Yeah, wonder. And I wonder if she's made out of anything else.
Yeah, it's stony, it's cold, it's unfeeling, it's rainy.
Blustery, yeah.
It's very, very Portland in the winter. Or any city in the winter, but you and I both know Portland. Like, it's the best reference. It's just winter. It's just winter.
It's just winter. Yeah. And we didn't really talk about the map that was on the first page.
Oh, yeah, the map. The map. So if Tarvalin is the Vagina Island, this is the Star Trek Communicator Island. It's the Star Trek badge.
Make it go. Yeah, it is.
Chess communicator thing.
The 2 legs are slightly different lengths. But
Yeah, but sometimes stylistically, like the different eras of Star Trek, they'll be not quite the same. So that's basically the shape here. And the Amhara gate is on the left of the legs. Like the two gates, or the market. There's the two markets. There's like kind of a market for each of the prongs of like the three prongs of the thing. And he's in the lower left of the triangle.
You know what else it kind of reminds me of is an upside down heart.
Oh, yeah.
With the two legs being aortas, veins coming off of it.
It does kind of have an anatomically correct heart vibe to it. Yeah.
Just rotated 180 degrees. And since north in this case is the upper left, it doesn't really matter what orientation it's in, because it is definitely not left as up.
Yeah. There is a really big, huge north arrow that says north is not up. Yeah. It really looks like some kind of volcanic, like, crater lake with Wizard Island kind of thing. I mean, it's a much bigger island relative to the crater. But
right. But it does look like a crater lake. It looks like that, maybe the asteroid of Farmatting is the remnants of the asteroid that fell on the ground, and the crater is what's around it. Although, I guess the island at the center isn't always the asteroid. It's just the material from the ground that's come back into the center.
Usually the asteroid itself has vaporized from the force of the impact.
Right.
But yeah, you get that like water droplet splash back up. But this is what I'm thinking. It's maybe more of a volcanic thing. And like there was a big explosion and then like a smaller cone built up. And that's the island that they're on. But like obviously very, very dead and dormant, because there's no mention of volcanic rock. There's mention of fucking marble, which is, as the geology nerds will know, not found in association with volcanoes.
So where does marble come from?
Marble comes from limestone, which comes from seafloors. Shallow seafloors where you get lots of coral.
So is it possible to have a volcano under a place where there has been a bunch of limestone, and that volcano pushes the limestone up, and you have a sort of convergence of the two types of stones?
Yes, and living in Oregon, actually, we actually have that here in Oregon. Because the state is a complete snowplow wedge of stuff from the Pacific Plate, which includes oceanic sediments and volcanic islands. So we actually do have volcanic materials smashed up against sedimentary materials. Not marble, though. We don't have marble. We have like scraps of limestone at best.
Sure.
But yes, you are absolutely right. You can absolutely have magma cutting through.
So I'm going to assume there's a marble quarry nearby that from ancient ocean covering this part of the world. And then a male channeler got angry and made a volcano for a minute.
I mean, a marble volcano made by a madman during the Age of Legends breaking situation absolutely tracks. I want to headcanon exactly that, actually, now that I've said it out loud.
Let's see. We've got a symbol for the golden hand on the left shoulder. I thought that was interesting for the guards. Not exactly the band of the red hand, maybe the band of the gold hand.
I'm thinking more like Midas's touch. Mostly because I remember really vividly that one stupid Aladdin third movie where he finds his dad and they have like the hand of Midas as the artifact. And
I have totally not seen that.
I have very vivid memories of the one time I saw it because it was so bad. I was so angry about how bad it was that I have very vivid memories of it.
I think anytime you don't have Robin Williams involved in an Aladdin's sequel, you're in trouble.
Honestly, you guys go listen to the Aladdin Behind the Timeline episode. So much cool stuff about Robin Williams in that. Also ragging on that third movie and the second one, because honestly, they both sucked. But yeah. I am kind of getting more of like the golden hand of Midas, the Midas touch. Just because they're such gold-oriented people. And I don't know, Jordan makes them so simplistic in their greediness. They're very like Ferengi-like in how two-dimensional he makes them. It's like the sea folk. It's like he doesn't like people that handle money. It's like Jordan has a very bad opinion of people who are concerned with money.
A lot of people have a bad opinion of bankers and investment people. And I mean, even today, we've made them bad guys of a lot of our economy.
Bankers have kind of always had a bad rap.
Yep.
But yes, you are right. That's not unique to Jordan by any means.
Here's your Jordan pun of the day. Apparently, again, from the origins, we learned that Machine Shin, the derivation of that name, is a machine of sin.
I like that, actually. And I have so much Origins reading to do. So for all of you guys, Seth and I are set to appear on Talk Around Riyadh on Thursday.
Yes.
To talk about Origins. Sections M...
F through M.
I still haven't gotten it out of the box yet. I have a lot of reading to do.
And that's why I'm like, oh yeah, I've been reading through this. I know about all these little puns. And let me tell you, if you didn't appreciate a pun beforehand, dude, Noel's name, Noel Charon, he knows all. That's literally the derivation of his name. Jordan shortened Noel knowing all to Noel. Because he's this wise man who's been around the block.
Well, I guess I need to schedule a tattoo removal session because I hate this. I hate everything about this and this information about Jordan I did not want. This has changed my entire life trajectory. And goodbye.
Oh. And a bunch of other ones are just like, characters, random characters that he's... Like, there's a John Henry one that's like Hen of the Hammer from Blowing the Horn. He's one of the... It's just like, yeah, that's supposed to be John Henry. Like, oh, okay, that's cool. So there's a lot of little backstories like that where you're like, okay, he just took a name of someone from history and just liked the name and changed it a little bit and stuck it on one of his characters. So what I'm finding is really those are the main things Jordan did. He either made a pun on an existing word, or he took a character that had some trait in common with the character he was writing and altered their name and gave it to this character. And sometimes he'd do separate first and last names, and it's just interesting to sort of get an idea of where he's coming up with all these names and how sometimes simplistic it is.
I love that we're getting that insight into his process, however long after the fact. This is truly a delight, all joking aside. This is very cool.
It turns out when you have to come up with several thousand names, you pull them from a lot of really dumb places.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, enough about Origins. We're not here to talk about that.
Not for now. Later.
Not for now.
Elsewhen. Okay, so Ryland, Darksbane, Urian, Stonebow, False Dragons. Part of why the city has defenses against channeling, part of why Rand is dealing with these assholes in the city is because it puts them a little bit more on an even footing if he doesn't have to channel to deal with them because he's a blade master and they're all posers.
So how was the Guardian around when Urian and how old is the Guardian is my question.
I assumed the Guardian was younger than those two because as I recall those two names are very old and I kind of assumed that they were part of why Farmatting got the thing that it got. Though I guess I actually don't know that that's the origin of the Guardian. I just kind of assumed, but I didn't do my research and I don't know where it came from.
No, I mean, the reality is the Farmatting Guardian doesn't have a lot of history behind it. It's just there. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know how long they've had it. It's just something that it's one of the reasons Farmatting drives me a little nuts is because we get some of the culture of it, but we don't get any history. It kind of pops into existence as this existing city that we never really heard a lot about because it's just the city-state that nobody really talks about until we visit it and we find out, oh, it's a artificial steading? What the hell? Why not just... And part of me is why not just have a city in a steading? Why do you have to have this special ter'angreal that recreates the effects of a steading, only not exactly when you could just have humans take over a steading? It's not like the Ogier are taking them all up.
Maybe Wells wouldn't work in a steading, and then RJ's entire sneaky James Bond plot doesn't get to happen.
Right.
Seems like a weak excuse to make up this entire nonsense just so he can have Nynaeve do a James Bond maneuver, but
Would Wells not work in a steading, though?
I assumed that was the flaw that was talked about with it being an artificial steading. It's just like a steading, except with a few flaws. I assumed that Wells working was one of the flaws. I don't know that for sure, though. Chat is asking, makes you wonder why Hawking didn't use that for his capital instead of to build it in a steading. That's a very good question. Maybe Farmatting, or whatever it was called at the time, was very, very resistant, and he decided to use a steading instead because it was available and not requiring a war?
Maybe. Sanderson at least implied that a well would work in a steading.
Well, then...
So, according to the wiki.
Then what's the difference? There's... whatever. Farmatting makes me tired.
That was my question. It does. And then he writes what I can only describe as a very misogynistic culture, except he gives the women the power and swap. He writes it as misogynistic and then swaps the cultures, right?
Yeah, like super Victorian or even earlier kind of misogyny.
Right.
But then, yeah, makes it misandry instead. Whee!
Right. Men have no ability to bank on their own. Their finances are completely controlled by the women in their lives. They're often, dolled up, given jewels. They have long hair that's decorated. It's this idea that the men are sort of the decorative class here in Farmatting.
And they're abused as a matter of casual.
Right.
Like the whole, you just have a strap in every hotel room. You make casual jokes about how you should beat your Outlander spouse, to teach them the thing. Like there's this very normalized lesser citizen caste that men are put into that is not meant to be equal or good at all. It's before the concept of equal rights hits people. Like that's the kind of system he wrote. But then, he made men the ones on the pedestal / cage instead.
But you don't have to go very far back in American history to see this exact same set of circumstances just around women. Right? Women who couldn't get their own credit card, couldn't get divorced without reason.
Couldn't get a bank account or a credit card without a man signing off on it. Yeah, that was like the 70s, I want to say.
Yeah, not that far before our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Many people that are older than me, I know, have, grew up under that.
Right. Yeah. And the whole the men can't have wealth unless it's left to them. They can't have a business. It's just, and they're happy with that. They're content with that. It's, no. Our grandmothers and mothers are absolutely #triggered.
Right. And this is designed to piss you off, right? I think this is very much designed at as a male reading this, you go, well, that's ridiculous. And it's well, yeah, it was back then too. There's a certain amount of Jordan sort of flashing old American culture in our face and putting it in this context. And this is really when people say, oh, he created a matriarchy, right? I'm well, in Farmatting, I don't think the entirety of Randland has, women on a pedestal the same way that are in power in the same way that men do.
Yeah, I think that this is in many ways the most honest of his attempts at doing that kind of role reversal to make that commentary because it is so straightforward. He tried with his overall world to make all this different nuance and all these different flavors of female-led societies and different versions of matriarchy so that he could play with that. And he really failed in a lot of ways to make it feel dimensional, to make it seem like men aren't actually lurking around every decision and every corner. In Farmatting, he just did a full-on one-to-one flip on a very specific era, and I feel like the point lands a lot more solidly as a result. Even though I hate Farmatting, he gets to hit the nail on the head better.
Which is where I have to bring up Matt and Tylan. Because that's the other place where he just does a one-to-one role reversal, right? He gets raped, nobody believes him, everybody laughs at him. He convinces himself it's something he's into. He ends up in a long-term relationship with his rapist, right? That's just a one-to-one reversal of something that you see all the time in the other direction with genders flipped. A more powerful male deciding he wants to be with a younger, less powerful woman and just making that happen. And the person says, I guess I'm okay with this because I have no choice.
Yeah. But he didn't try to make Farmatting funny. So it's really obvious that it's not meant to be funny,
right,
It is the ambiguity. But no, I think you're absolutely right. If you take that aspect out of it, I think he does harder with his 1.5 to 2.5. He does better with his 1-to-1s.
So we're following Rand around. Rand has dyed his hair black, so he's not the tall redheaded stranger. He's the tall black-haired stranger. And he has figured out where Rochade one of the four, the fearsome foursome, as I've heard them referred to.
I've never heard that, but I love it.
Yeah, just from my reading today, I saw that referenced a few times, who attacked him back in Cairien. Obviously, including Deshiva, who would be the fifth, but Deshiva doesn't count because he's actually a Forsaken, which is why he's disappeared. And so Rand, as far as we can tell, has set a trap for them. He pulled a Lanfear. Remember when Lanfear gave the girls the bags? She led them as Elsie Grinwell to the bags full of evidence. And in each bag of evidence was one piece of information that pointed at Tanchico. And they ended up in Tanchico because Lanfear painted this sort of accidental trail that looks like it got left behind. But even they knew it was a trap. And Rand then did the exact same thing to the Forsaken, or to the fearsome foursome, where he was bouncing around to all these places. We saw him, going from city to city to city, claiming he was going to look at these things. But at each place, he left one little clue pointing towards Farmatting.
Yeah. And it worked. These guys didn't even realize it was a trap, because I think Rand was a little bit more subtle than Lanfear in this case. I think he left a harder trail because he actually thought he was trying to trick adults, not children. So,
well, and he left the trail in various different places. Although he does say later they found it quicker than he expected, and maybe someone pointed it out to them. And I was just wondering, maybe there's a Demandred who's making, because the guys later we see from their point of view, they get told to kill Rand by like 3 different people. Right. And so which one of those people pointed out that Rand was going to be in Farmatting? Was it Demandred? Was it Moradin? Or was it Taim?
Moradin is the one who's most likely to have some way of knowing. But I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's not obvious to us, or whether they figured it out themselves. Again, we don't. It's not obvious to me who figured out where Rand was. Who's the smart one of the group?
Deshiva might have just been like, I'm going to give you guys this clue and then bounce.
I'm pretty sure Deshiva just bounced, though. He's like a coward. He's just gone, right? Like,
yeah.
He got. His cover's blown. He's no longer the Ashaman nearby Rand who he trusts. Yeah, I think he's gone, right? And then very shortly he shows up to the last battle and gets fireballed.
The cleansing, but yes.
Yeah, the cleansing. Yeah, sorry.
The pentultimate battle, let's call it.
The pentultimate battle.
Because it really is in so many ways. Like, that is the last big battle before the last battle. So, pentultimate battle.
And it does involve a lot of the Forsaken and a lot more power than we've seen used in almost any other circumstance, right? I mean, you've got these circles of people with these incredible sa'angreal moving around. So it is sort of a prequel to the last battle, you're right.
In some ways.
Without the armies, because it's like we're able to get the channelers imported here to do fights. And so it's a section, like where we've seen other armies fight. This is the first time we really see channelers go at it.
It's really funny how he thinks about how the fearsome fivesome, as he thinks of them, are going to be showing up, and including Deshiva. And it's a pity that a Forsaken wouldn't come here and try to get him here, because that would work really well. And it's like, yeah, Deshiva's not gonna try. The Forsaken is in fact going to self-select out of this.
Yeah, he's gone. Oh, interesting we've got Lewis Theron still in Rand's head, which I think is very interesting. One, because Lewis Theron doesn't want to be there because Lewis Theron is terrified of not being able to channel. But the fact that he's still mad inside a place where there's no channeling, right? He's been exposed to the taint. Going into a steading, going into Farmatting isn't going to help him at this point.
Oh, yeah.
He's still mad.
Yeah, no, his trauma, his loops, the damage that's been done, that's not an artificial thing. That's a real stain on his psyche at this point. And Rand's agreeing with the voice. Yeah, the voice has a good point. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Frequently does these days. Yeah, there's no longer much argument. There's not a lot of space between Rand and LTT. As we see at the end of this chapter where he's like, I could draw them all from scratch, and I've never been able to draw, but Lewis Theron could. I'm gaining skills, not just knowledge, not just voices. I'm actually gaining the skills of a different man.
The integration is speeding up. I also get a fun reminder that Farmatting is not only super misogynist, it's also kind of a police state.
Yes.
It's a lot of very aggressive cops everywhere. And if you do anything that looks uncomfortable, they're going to come by and check your papers and check your sword. And it's got some police state vibes going along with its capitalism and its misogyny, misandry.
Though there's weapons control, because those can't trust those men with weapons. That's they'd
Men are very
problems.
emotional with weapons.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's true. That's true. You never know when they might just have an argument for no reason and start shooting each other.
Yeah, they just start swinging out of nowhere. It's just...
If it wasn't so accurate to our current society, I would be more sarcastic. But we do have a pandemic of men shooting other people in this country.
We love toxic masculinity mixed with white supremacy. It's good and healthy. Why does a wave of dizziness hit him? Who's the murky face? Why did that happen? Because he's not channeling. He's not seizing the source.
Well, but it's all about crossing of the streams. It's getting worse. Now it's happening to him even when he doesn't seize the power. It used to be just when he seized the power, that caused the crossover with him and Moradin being in a different place. Now it's just happening to him randomly. They are very close together at this point.
So do you think that Moradin did anything? Like, did Moradin reach for the source? Or is this just like
I don't think so.
Random?
I really do think it's just... Hold on, let me get to that spot. Yeah, I mean, clearly the murky face is Moradin, right? We've established that without a doubt, right? And we later have LTT saying, how many will we three kill before the end?
Clearly referencing Moradin Ishii. Yeah.
Moradin as Ishii, who's killing a bunch of people, and Rand as well. And so, and this is always before happened when he sees the power, but I don't see any reason why it has to happen when he seizes the power.
Okay. It's just getting closer and closer. It's like the channeling sickness, right? Like eventually it comes on without even... Okay. Cool. I thought maybe it was like because like Fane was walking by him in the crowd okay.
I can't come up with any specific reason why this hits him now.
Okay, cool. And then we think about all the lost Aiel. It's a fun little side tangent. One of the few good things Farmatting does is apparently give refuge to the lost Aiel.
Which he caused. But yeah, the man he stumbles into is one of the lost Aiel, those who threw their spears down. That's clearly a man who's Rand drove off.
Yeah, these are Aiel who have found a different accommodation with the bleakness. This is Aiel who have decided that the bleakness will be best resolved by returning to an Age of Legends-like state of servitude, without knowing what that means or why it was happening. But Farmatting is, for some reason, the place that they're kind of gravitating to. I suspect because it has a lot of need for servants, because this is a very like Victorian England kind of society. And so they're going to need a lot of like domestic labor. So I'm guessing that the job market was just like super open, but I don't know.
I think there's also the culture of, I was going to say the female dominated culture that they have. Misandry, thank you. Except in reverse, right? Because it's...
Misogyny is the one, and then misandry is against men.
Misogyny, right, thank you. Okay. Yes, so I mean, that culture really means that you have all these former warriors who they walk into the city and they're immediately told what to do.
Oh.
Right? So I think there's a certain amount of just... As long as someone's telling me what to do and I'm not making choices, I can be the servant. I can be the person who isn't violating any toe because I'm not making any choices. I'm just being a guy shine.
This capitalist police state is so rigid that my lost ass feels like I know what I'm doing.
Right. And I don't have GE Toe to follow anymore, so I follow the rules and the laws in place in this city, and it feels like a very, good fit for someone who has lost their ideology.
Wow. Well, I mean, it seems like Farmatting is doing a decent job of absorbing this strange new population, so points for them doing that, because that's a really weird thing that these hundreds of people have found themselves in. So yeah, Rand loses sight of Rochade, regains sight of Rochade, and they go sneaky into the alley so that they can do a, ha, I tricked you. No, ha, I tricked you. No, ha, I tricked you.
I like that he doesn't want to lose his sword, not because it's Layman's sword or power wrought, but because it was a gift from Avienda. That's the only reason he cares about it.
It's so cute. Yeah, no, I like that too, that it's not for the edge, it's for the sentimentality.
So yeah, he tries to supply Rochade. Turns out Rochade was actually tricking him into following him into an alley where Kisman already was, so they could, double team him. But this is the Rand that killed multiple warders with his bare hands when Min was threatened. This is not the Rand of the Eye of the World. This is a man, he feels no fear in this situation. He knows he can kill them. It's not a big deal to him. I think there's a little bit of insanity going on there, right? Later when Min says, you felt nothing that whole time, he's like, why would I? I wasn't afraid. And it's like, yeah, because you're nuts, right? Anyone who's not insane would feel afraid in that situation. I don't care how skilled you are and how good you are. You're not a channeler. You're at this point, you're not powerful. You just have your own abilities.
Yeah, you're going into a hand-to-hand combat situation. There should be an adrenaline spike. If there is not, something has disconnected in your brain. Like it's a thing. Yeah, but I love how Rand has very much gone from his gonna pull my Jack London reference here. He's very much gone through his arc with the Call of the Wild, right? The Eye of the World, he's the kidnapped puppy that doesn't understand how wild dogs operate in the slightest, doesn't know what snow is. Rand has now gotten to the point where he just tears dogs' throats out without warning because he's learned that that's the effective way to survive in the Yukon. Rand literally thinks to himself as he goes in to kill, the fact that the man stopped to gloat sealed his fate. I'm not even fighting him. I'm just finishing the fact that this man is already dead because he paused to twirl his mustache. Whatever. Let's just follow through now.
I also like the interruption of I'm monologue. No, you're not. You're dead.
Yeah, it's very he goes to strike a pose and give his speech. He's rehearsed this in the mirror. He's had dreams about this, and he gets a few words in before he's just in half.
Well, and I think his goal was also to distract Rand while Kisman snuck up behind him and stabbed him, right? He's there being the target of attention, and that just got thrown off because Rand just didn't wait. They were going to stab him in the back.
Because he's doing the Call of the Wild thing. He's hit his Call of the Wild space.
Right.
It's no, I don't signal that I'm going to kill you. I just kill you.
And so I love that Kisman tries to stab Rand and, of course, ends up stabbing Rochade instead. It's I feel it happens all the time in movies where you're fighting one guy and the other guy comes into the room with a gun and you twirl around and hold the guy you're fighting in front of you as a body shield and his buddy ends up shooting him up a whole bunch.
Tigraine did that in Blood Snow in the show with the daggers.
Right, totally.
It's a whole thing. It's one of my favorite moves because it's so predictable. But it gets me every time. I will never not love that move.
Oh, you're shooting your buddy. Oh,
it's so good.
No. That dude, you were just... And it's always well, you're dead anyway. I might as well. I feel like it's zombie movies, too, where the one guy gets bit and you just start shooting into the crowd. You're well, you're a zombie now, too.
Right. Or, you just, grab one of the... You're trying to break into a bank, and so you grab one security guard and just use it as a full-on body shield as you get to the other 9 of them and take them out. I think V for Vendetta... I think V does that at one point. It's a million variations. I love all of them.
It happens many, many times during the John Wick. That's the one. Thanks, Dentok. Yeah. Oh my God. The number of times where he absolutely pulls I'm going to use you as a shield while I shoot a bunch of other people. It's almost his signature move, right? Because he's always going up against ridiculous odds where there's no way he should be shot a million times. And the way to avoid that is just well, you stand behind somebody and use them as a body shield and then they're dead. Plus you get to shoot everybody else. Yeah,
it's an oldie but a goldie. Okay, so... Yeah, we get some Benny Hill music in this really bleak, dark alleyway of death.
Right. And then the cops are coming.
Yeah, and then they have to agree to attack each other later because the cops are coming now and nobody wants to get arrested. And it's very gangster.
Mm-hmm. And it is this whole thing where you're why? I guess it's not necessarily clear from this chapter that he can't channel.
I think...
I don't know if he actually talks about the Guardian. I feel
But he thinks in this section, no doubt Kisman, was one of those so proud of being able to use the power as a weapon that he had disdained really learning the sword. So we get this emphasis that the sword is the only weapon I feel like he says something about not being able to channel. Oh, that's why Luz Therid is freaking out.
Right. But we don't know why what's wrong with this. I feel like there's a little bit of suspension in this whole chapter where you're like, wait, why would Rand get arrested? Why would Rand fight these people with swords? What's going on with Farmatting and the power? Because I feel like it's one of those assumptions that we know because we've read this book so many times. But the first time I read this chapter, it's not clear to me that nobody can channel. They never state that, and you have to sort of put it together from the various reactions that Rand is having.
I totally thought it was explained in this chapter, but now I don't know. I could have sworn it was explained here, but the time is a puddle situation. All right, well. I'm
going to do a quick search of Guardian in this book and see. So Guardian isn't mentioned until 2 chapters later.
And I mean, you're right that the big info dump explanation is later. That's in To Lose the Sun.
You know, an implication that, Rowland Darksbane and you're in Stonebow, they're why Rand's in Farmatting, but it doesn't explain that's because the Guardian is set up to keep them from channeling. Like, I really do think this entire chapter, if you're reading through for the first time, you do not know that he can't channel. But, I mean, context clues, it's obvious that he can't.
I think you're right. Wow. I think you're right that we don't actually know that yet if you're assuming a linear read. Mm-hmm. Weird. All right. Cool.
And so that's just one of those things I think that when you're first time reading, it's one of the things that's very confusing about Farmatting because you're like, I don't understand what's going on. Why is he fighting with swords?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, Rand runs away from the scene of the crime because Farmatting has accepted Elida's decree that only Elida's White Tower can handle the Dragon Reborn. So he knows that he's going back in the box if he gets captured by the authorities. And that is what happens, so it's a well-founded fear.
Basically, until, of course, Codswain, who's from Farmatting, and we should say that Codswain and Varen are both Farmatting natives. They grew up there.
Yes. And Codswain gets him out by destroying the authority of the ruler of the city. So it's not like it's an easy thing.
No. Yeah. And she definitely undercuts the fact that I'm sure the White Tower was going to send someone to capture him, right? She stops that from happening by getting him out.
Well, I guess, I don't know. Does the message get out in time, or does it just end up getting lost in the shuffle? We'll see when we get there into that chapter and see what the councilwoman says specifically. But yeah, perspective change.
Perspective change, yeah. We switch to Kisman, who's running away from the cops as well. Also very relieved they didn't have to fight Rand because he was drastically outclassed. Because he doesn't really train with the blade whatsoever.
And he's just a coward, obviously.
Yeah. And we get it's sort of a, 3-page mostly an internal monologue as he's running through the streets.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of interesting little tidbits in here. Because, again, anytime we get a POV from someone evil, we get a little bit of insight into what evil is going on and what their goals are. But I think the most important thing is that we get the order to kill Rand from 3 different people. The Mahale, Damondred, and Moradin. So, and obviously, the kill him from Mahale, that was back when that was the end of Book 7, The Crown of Swords, when he was attacked in Cairhien and they blew up the castle.
Right. Right, the attack on the Sun Palace that Rand has been running from ever since.
Right. And we get that Deshiva has simply vanished, so we assume there's been no more contact with Deshiva, a.k.a. Osengar, since that attack.
Right.
And he's assumed just reverted back to being a Forsaken, because he's not a spy anymore. But like I said, we don't see him for very long because he dies at the end of this book.
Right. Then I think the next time we see him, he's like, ugh, I hated being a double agent, being Deshiva was such a crappy perspective. I don't like it. And then he gets fireballed. Like, I think that's the next time we interact with him.
The lab rat had to learn how to be a jock, basically.
Ugh, awful. Awful.
Right, terrible. I think the most interesting bit here is that Damondred is trying to kill Rand. Because at this point, Damondred is out in Shara. He's taken over that area. He's solidifying his power. I always really find his involvement in Randland to be interesting because I really do think that Jordan didn't intend to have Demandred in Shara. I think he intended to have him among one of the armies. Specifically, I think he wanted to have him in charge of the Band of the Red Hand as Vannin. I'm going to die on that hill, Vannin as Demandred.
I think it's a good hill to die on. I think I might join you there.
Yeah, and it's really just like, what is Demandred's involvement? And I think that's one of the reasons that people always speculated, and there was so much speculation at this time as to what Demandred was doing, right? And this particular bit doesn't rule out Demandred as Taim.
That's what I was thinking, was that this feels like an echo of Tamandred that didn't quite get scrubbed out all the way. Because it would make sense, right? If Demandred gave the same order in two different disguises, depending on who he was talking to or through what channels, like, this absolutely would work with Tamandred. Or with Vanindred. I love it.
And also that whole, like, make sure you're not discovered by anybody, especially the Mahale, when he is the Mahale. Is that, like, that's a cover for him being... Yeah, it feels very Tamandred, and I think this was used as evidence for Tamandred. I mean, like, why would they give the same orders, right? Like, and unfortunately, I don't have any good explanation based on what we know Demandred is doing at this time as to why he wants to kill Rand. Other than just getting him out of the way, because Demandred thinks he's the Dragon Reborn going forward in that weird, like, he's the Sharan dragon.
Maybe it's all because of the fact that he wants to go and cleanse the source. Because we see that Moradin is more interested in Rand's possessions.
Yes. Well, he wants the keys to the Sangreal that are the Children Call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's also where Demandred was going. Because Demandred, we know from River of Souls, is going for Sakarnan. He's going for a big old powerful thing. So maybe it was kill Rand and take his shit. Maybe just take his shit, whatever. Maybe it was kind of that, if he's got an artifact powerful enough to do the cleansing, then not only do we need to stop the cleansing, maybe we can pilfer his nukes.
And that is Moradin's motivation. I don't think that's Demandred's.
Okay.
Just because because Kisman comments that Moradin is like, bring everything in his possession to me, right? That's very much a Moradin thing. He does not say that Demandred has the same orders.
Yeah, you're right. Demandred just wants secrecy.
Demandred just wants him dead.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I don't think Demandred wants Moradin to know that he's trying to have Rand killed.
Because Rand is supposed to be left alive, blah, blah, blah. And Demandred's like, no, kill that bitch.
The interesting thing about Moradin's order is, does Moradin know that he's linked to Rand at this point? And how would the killing of Rand affect Moradin, and why is he giving that order so nonchalantly, like, kill him if you must? When later, he absolutely he's like, do not touch him, do not hurt him at all, and that's why he punishes Semirog, because she voids that order and fireballs his hand, and Moradin's all pissed because he feels that.
He must not know at this point. He must be in for a rude awakening at some point between now and then. Because I think he knows by the time that Semirog blasts Rand's hand off. I think he knows, and he's given that order not to hurt Rand by then.
Yeah, and I have a hard time believing he hasn't had some experience that tells him that he's linked with Rand. Because he must be, if Rand's seeing his face, he must be seeing Rand's face. And he knows what Rand's face looks like. And he knows what LTT's face looks like.
Yeah. It might also be that Moradin just, like, really doesn't think that anyone's going to be able to kill Rand. Certainly not these third-rate Ashaman punks.
That might be, kill him if you must.
Go for it. You go for it. Go ahead, honey. You try. Let's see.
And maybe the link is weak enough now that he thinks killing Rand will break it.
Sure, yeah. Maybe he's not aware of how intrinsically their souls have merged. Maybe he's in the process of researching it and staring out the window and smoking his pipe about it and thinking through the philosophical implications.
Maybe he's hoping it does kill him.
I mean, and then there's that.
Right.
And then abruptly, Podden Fane poofs in and out of the plot for a quick second.
Abruptly, something stung his arm. He stared down. We don't see Fane at all. We only see the result of the cut.
He belongs to me.
But when you turn, there's only the crowd in the street, right? So, out of thin air, right? The title of the chapter, Fane pops in, cuts Kisman, kills him.
And we get confirmation of that, like, when Rand runs into him in, like, a chapter or two. So it's not like this is a mystery.
Well, and, the whole bloating up instantly and dying from a shallow cut is a very, Fane's dagger. We've seen when
one artifact does that.
Right. And we saw Matt do that to somebody in book 2.
Nana Shanchan soldier number 37. How dare you forget?
Yeah, and so we just get a first-person POV of dying from Fane's dagger, which mostly seems to be panicking and trying to get outside to healing.
It's a very nightmarish sequence where he just starts to run and formulate half-baked ideas about how he's going to save himself, and then before he's really finished coming up into the anxiety freak-out, he's dead. It's that fast.
But I think it's also really important to understand that if Rand got cut by Fane, there's no saving him this time.
Right. This is letting you know what Rand is going up against. This is the real trap, right? Rand just feels like he sprang and walked away from a little trap. That was actually just a test for the real trap that he's walking into, which involves this knife that will absolutely kill him faster than Min can say there's a problem.
And one thing that people miss a lot that happens later is Fane actually projects images of people who are dead. And so Rand sees dead Ashaman. And those are actually Fane's powers, which obviously don't involve channeling at all.
No, Fane has some sort of weird hallucinatory agency over people's minds that has nothing to do with anything but malevolence.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that takes us back to, remember the flies? Mm-hmm. When Rand in the village encounters a Fane trap where he almost gets captured in a loop with the flies and the food on the table and the Trolloc attack. There's that loop that he gets caught in, and that's a Fane trap that he almost dies in. And that's those powers of hallucinogens that Fane uses to create.
Yeah, the most
traps.
Nightmarish of hallucinogens, mind you. So yeah, that guy dies, so we are forcibly made to do another POV switch.
Right.
Now that one's done.
Because it's hard to stay in the POV of a dead man, yeah. And so that's 2 out of the 4 Forsaken down.
Fearsome foursome?
Yeah, that's now the terrible twosome, I suppose.
Yes.
So he's at a fancy inn. He sort of shows up, doing, pack your shit, we gotta go.
Yeah. Trying to play it cool, but also, like, not cool at all.
They know where I am. They know where we're staying. We could be attacked by, And again, I'm like, there's only 2 of them left, and you've got you and Lan. Just wait for them, right? Like, there's not exactly a big threat to mediocre swordsmen going up against what are probably the 2 best swordsmen of all time, right? Rand and Lan.
So much about the urgency of this entire plot confuses me.
Uh-huh.
I don't understand why he needs to kill the 5 weakest enemies that he has, as he sees it, before taking on the 8 of his biggest enemies. Why he needs to do it in this city with magic dampening fields, why he needs to run away from the potential that the people he's trying to kill might find him. Nothing in this makes sense to me. I don't know why Rand is doing any of it.
Because he's nuts.
Well, that is a simple explanation, at least.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, he thinks he needs to eliminate these people before he tries. I think he's stalling, is what I think he's scared of trying to cleanse the source, and I think he's stalling.
It feels to me like when you procrastinate clean, right? You're like, I need to do this podcast, so I will clean the bathroom instead. I feel like Rand's doing that, but like with plots to take his life. He's just like, I need to cleanse the source that's threatening all magic for all mankind, literally mankind. But I'm going to just play assassin killing whack-a-mole for a few minutes first. And
think about it.
Maybe that's why I don't like it, is because I do that all the time.
Yeah. What happens after he cleanses the source? There's really nothing else to do except start the last battle, in which case he's going to die. So it's one of those things where he's got like step 1, procrastinate. Step 2, cleanse the source. Step 3, die.
Yeah, I
might be procrastinating a little bit.
You're right. He doesn't do anything but try to get people sorted out for the last battle. I mean, it's a bunch of negotiations. It's a bunch of meeting with people. But you're right. As far as his to-do list, it's pretty much cleanse the source, fight the Dark One. So one last side quest before doing that. All right. You know what? Honestly, I'm less annoyed at this plot now because now I think I know why he's doing this. It's not for a good reason, but that is in and of itself a good reason.
And he's gathered everybody he needs. He's gathering the most powerful channelers in all of Randland and sticking them in a place where they can't channel.
It's a very effective use of resources, yeah.
But extremely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And yeah, we get some fun Min stuff because Min, first of all, loves being called wife. She enjoys that very much. She's making raunchy comments to Olivia and embarrassing Nynaeve. She's pretending to take advice from the innkeeper. She is just living up her need to, basically her job is to just chill out and have a good time and like have brunch. Like it's literally like that is like the front facing part of the subterfuge that the party is doing is some people need to just hang out in bed all day and read books and eat croissants. And she's like, you know, I could get used to this.
And I love that there's this women's room that's very much like the men's smoking room where they used to like retire to drink whiskey and smoke cigars and no women were allowed. Same thing, just in reverse, except it's like tea and... Yeah,
because women don't actually smoke because like even though the women are in control in this society, we all actually know women are the more delicate flowers. Like, let's be real. Like the misogyny of the author is not actually that buried.
Speaking of origins of the Wheel of Time, there actually is in Pipes... There was a note where Jordan says women don't smoke, and if one does, it's seen as a very odd standout thing that's worth commentary because women don't smoke in Randland.
Like, on the one hand, he made gayness not remarkable, but on the other hand, he made women smoking remarkable.
Yep.
I just... Robert!
Well, and geez, aren't we in our modern society? Aren't we having an issue with women like getting more cancer diagnosis because they're smoking more than they used to?
I don't know about that per se, but I did learn a lot about cigarette marketing to women on last week's Behind the Bastards about how cigarettes and cigarette advertising kind of made our whole modern society, and getting women into the smoking game in like the 20s was a really big part of that story specifically.
Because that's the whole thing about the cigarette is it was a cigar for women, right?
Well, no, actually. The cigarette was the working man's tobacco.
Oh, okay.
Because it was much easier to do on the job quickly than a pipe. Getting women to smoke cigarettes was a whole thing. It involved a lot of weird gaslighty marketing that I don't need to go into, but fascinating. I'll put a link to that Behind the Bastards in the show notes because apparently this podcast is just a shill for Behind the Bastards. You're welcome.
Everyone, hey, we have obsessions here.
Hyperfocus what?
Fire Phoenix brings up Virginia Slims that were specifically targeted at women. So there was like women targeted advertisement to... Yeah,
it started out, there was just cigarettes. And then the idea came about that we could have like different brands of cigarettes and they could compete and like go for different markets. And then eventually one of those markets was women. That was more or less the order of events. Very, very strange stuff. Very disheartening. The numbers about how quickly cigarette consumption changed or tobacco consumption changed, the decades it changed, and the health effects that we know have affected our families in those periods of time. It's all quite disheartening. And yes, it does, chat is correct. It starts at being marketed at children. Tobacco advertising starts at being marketed at children. So all of the weird legislation we have around how you can't market tobacco to children, I always thought it was really weird because I'm like, who the fuck would do that? That seems really weird. Why do you need to make rules for this thing? Turns out because that's the entire origin story. That's why. So it's depressing. It's so depressing. There's so much cancer that didn't need to happen because some literal fuckwaffle was just really good at inventing a need, inventing a desire that people wanted to fulfill. And
Same thing with leaded gas. They knew it was bad from the beginning.
Yeah.
They knew it was bad right from the beginning. And they just, all that cancer, all that issue, all the problem with lead exposure.
Money, money, money.
Yeah. We're going to be saying the same thing about plastics and microplastics in 20 years. They knew it, but they told us we could recycle it. And we thought we were recycling for a long time, but they lied to us for money. And it turns out plastics don't get recycled. They just get thrown into the ocean.
Hey, now, some of them get burned and breathed in by small children that live at the sides of landfills.
Sorry. Sometimes we burn a bunch of fossil fuels to send the plastics to a third world country where they get processed by children for a while and then dumped in the ocean.
Yeah, get the science correct.
Sorry. I was way off base.
Ugh, I hate everything.
So how's the microplastics in your bloodstream treating you?
Well, honestly, I've never been a fan of those body products with microplastics in them. So my exposure has not been nearly as up close and personal as most people's.
I think the problem is now it's just in the food that we're being in the water supply.
Yeah. So I've only got the baseline, whatever. And I am reducing my food miles more and more as the years go by. So I don't know how the microplastics in my blood are because I don't look. That's the real answer. I don't want to know. I've been freaked out about being contaminated by my environment ever since I learned about Chernobyl. And that happened before I was born. So,
Mm-hmm. It turns out we're not a part of nature. We are a part of nature.
Yeah. And there is no away, it turns out. There's no away. No. It's just not.
No, we create these artificial walls around us and think that separates us. And it's like, no, it really doesn't.
Yeah. It's a whole thing.
Anyway, let's talk about Nynaeve's jewelry.
Good distraction. Shiny, pretty.
Yes, shiny bling. So Nynaeve is wearing her paralysis net, right?
Yeah, I don't quite know where the line is between a paralysis net and all the other cool terangrial you can wear. I don't know if it's the full body thing or just if you have them in one set or if it's all the things together. But yeah, she's decked out in all her terangrial, whatever you call that.
I think she's wearing a set of terangrial because later we hear Rand as Lewis Theron when he sort of brings those personalities together where he's like, I made one of the first ones. I know exactly what they are, right? I've worn many a paralysis net for men. Right.
I just don't know if she's wearing a paralysis net and more things or if it's all a paralysis net. I don't know the nomenclature, but I think she's wearing everything that she's got. I do think she's fully decked. She's, when you're in video games and you're just wearing all the armor, that's the setting she's on.
Yeah, let's just say she makes a lot of noise when she walks, right? This ching,
yeah, negative 12 ching, to stealth right now.
But, we've talked about paralysis nets in the past. I mean, they do everything from give you a well to channel from to Ongrial to Matt's medallion is possibly. I don't know if Nynaeve has one of those. I know Codswain does. We don't get... Let's see if we can look up Nynaeve's paralysis net really quick. Jeweled belt, which is the well. A golden ring, which will vibrate to signal that Sidara Sidene is being channeled within a certain distance. A golden ring with the blue sapphire that will tell her if anyone's feeling anger or hostility in her range.
Yeah, she thinks at some point about how ineffective it is because she's just around Rand and Lan all the time, and she's like, that's their constant state. So helpful.
Or maybe it's going off because she's the one who's constantly feeling anger or hostility. Yeah. She could be setting it off herself. That would be funny. That was the irony of it, is she's the one who's feeling anger and hostile all the time. A golden bracelet with fire stones, and that gives her armor better than steel. And Codswain's 6-pointed star ornament does the same thing. So basically, she's physically impenetrable.
And better than steel because it protects all the spots, even the weird flexible spots that are usually the weak points in armor. Even the armpits and the face are going to be protected.
Right. Seems like that would be really useful for Lan to have if he was going up against, I don't know, Demandred in the last battle.
You would think.
That would be a cool thing because we never see the effect of that. We never see her not get stabbed.
Yeah. And to answer chat's question, are firestones opals? I think so. I'm pretty sure firestones are opals. I don't know, and my hands are full of holding onto a stuffed animal right now, but I'm pretty sure that firestones are opals. off the top of my head. Yep. All right. Yep. Firestones are opals. I was right. Opal is a really, really broad category, so not surprised.
What's made of an opal? Or what is an opal made of?
An opal is basically 1 silicon, 2 oxygen, SiO2. And it's a precipitate of minerals, so it means that there was a rock that then water got next to, and the minerals came out of the rock into the water as ions, and then moved along in the water and found like a cavity or somewhere and decided to hang out and precipitate out and become a rock again. And so that's why there's a lot of different varieties and the exact kinds of stuff in it and the exact inclusions. But 1 silicon, 2 oxygen is the basic structure. And then a billion little things can get in the spaces. And you can have sunstones, firestones, black opals. They're all over the place. And they're semi-precious, like moonstones. So yeah, some of them are actually considered precious. And most of them are considered semi-precious.
Editing Aradia here to make a couple of corrections to what I said. So basically, opal is a hydrated, amorphous form of silica. So the formula is SiO2 times NH2O, where the N just stands for number. So the range of H2O to SiO2 can be quite large. It forms in a wide variety of circumstances via water transportation, the way that I said. That's all correct. But I just wanted to include the fact that this is actually not a true crystal. This is not a true mineral. This is a mineraloid because of all the water that's in it and making it different. Okay, I think that's all the corrections that I needed to make for that. Thanks for listening and learning.
The other person there's a lot about is Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia.
She is one of the former Shanchan.
Yeah, she's the Damani who was a Damani for 400 years, i.e. a third of the Empire's total life.
Right. She's super old. She's colored at 13 or 14, as most of them are. And she was the one who, when she was taken, she was unnamed in the battle, but she was taken in the final battle at the end of the previous book. And she killed a bunch of 2 Ashman, wasn't it? Being taken or something like that?
A couple of soldiers and 1 Ashaman, I think. But yeah, she is one of the first. No, she's one of the in the middle of Rand's campaign against the Shanchan and Altara. She's one of the many captives, one of the few that gets a description, but she's smack in the middle of that timeline. She's not at the beginning or the end, I think. But yeah, she kills a handful of people for being uncollared, and so I guess she's near the beginning because she's how he learns not to uncollar them.
Right. She killed 9 defenders of the stone and 1 Ashaman soldier.
9! 10 in total. Wow.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so she's this 300-year-old woman with the personality of a teenager sometimes because she's been collared ever since. And she's like...
Yeah. But then she also has this, like... Parts of her knowledge of human nature are very advanced. The way she interacts with Nynaeve is very mature. It's the way she interacts around boys. It's like she's such a contradiction because she's 300. It's like there's so much baggage there. But yeah, she has this really interesting relationship with Nynaeve where...
But she's been a slave all 300 years. You know, it's like she's never lived her life.
Yeah.
And never had a chance to be herself.
And then she, like, takes charge of Nynaeve. Like, the one person who nobody takes charge of. And that's who Olivia is able to, like, really confidently interact with. She's so much shyer with so many other people. Min tells her so much. But then Nynaeve is the person who, like, absolutely goes second fiddle to Olivia. It's the strangest, most interesting thing. Well, she drawled, staring down at Nynaeve, but somehow she made the word both a criticism and a command.
Do you think it might be Nynaeve internalizing the power structure of the White Tower? That you basically bow down to someone who's more powerful than you, and Olivia is one of the only people who has more raw power than Nynaeve that she encounters?
That's the only explanation I can think of. It's funny to me that Olivia so naturally falls into it because she doesn't have that programming, but I do think that's what's happening with Nynaeve.
Well, and there's an interesting parallel between Nynaeve and Olivia, which is Nynaeve also kind of didn't get to live out her teenage years because she became the wisdom at such a young age.
Oh, that's true. She was like 19. or something like that. 21? Like, really? Yeah.
And she never really had a chance to flirt or any of that kind of stuff. And that's why I think she's talking a lot about Lan in this situation.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who got involved with their spouse as a teenager, relatable. I skipped a lot. I did a lot of skipping from child to adult and like missed a lot of the normal learning curves. I was even one of those kids that had to grow up really fast at a really young age. So like really, really young before my brother was born young. So that's actually really relatable. I put that in that perspective that like these two women have that in common. And it does give you a strange mix of command and deference that doesn't track always.
And it does feel like Nynaeve lost a little bit of her confidence in dealing with all the stuff post the Bowl of the Winds, dealing with all the different societies, and like the first time she's dealing with people who are stronger than her, women who are more strong-willed than her, women who seem to be more confident at arranging groups of people than her. Talk about like the kin and all the stuff that went down with them. Like
Elise is a really big blow to Nynaeve's confidence because Elise is weak in the power, but so much stronger in personality that, yeah, Olivia's actually person number 2 to make that kind of surprising reverse on her.
And Nynaeve fled, right? She was like, she's supposed to be teaching the Windfinders right now, and she ran away. So she's like, I cannot deal with that. I am out. I'm taking Rand's out, and I'm going with him to go save the world because I can't deal with these women anymore. They're too much. And
that also does give her a bit of the moral low ground. Olivia's like, I was a slave for 300 years. You couldn't handle it for 3 months. Whatever.
Right. It's also why I think Nynaeve would make a terrible Amyrlin.
Oh my God. So bad. Never let that woman anywhere near the Senate level power structure. Like, no. Just send her off to be queen. No. Do not make her Amyrlin.
So much about also in the Origins book about Nynaeve being the Lady of the Lakes and
Nimue,
and just how much of her story is very tied into that.
I'm looking forward to learning a bunch about Arthurian legends via this book.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there, especially with the main cast and the Andor cast.
Yeah, I know the Cliff Notes. This is going to be like a deep dive that I actually can remember beyond the moment when I read it. Yay! Okay, then we get one of the other really good Nynaeve contradictory moments. Who wants a man she can make jump through hoops whenever she likes? Yeah. Everyone, record scratch, turns to look at her like...
It's like, you do that to Lan constantly.
Exactly the marriage that you have?
But it's not, because that's the marriage she has in public. In private, he makes her pay for that, I think. Very much so. And so she has to... taking into consideration, like, is this worth making him jump through the hoops? Because in private, he can make me do the same.
I think it's also part of that thing we see in Wheel of Time so much, where the way that people see themselves on the inside versus how they project themselves and how they're seen is like super diametrically opposed. And Nynaeve sees herself as being in this strong, like, power struggle with this man, and that they are fighting in a good way, like you're saying, do I want to put this in my balance sheet? Do I want to have him get me back for this later? Like, I feel like she sees it as a much more like push-pull. She doesn't have a man who jumps through hoops. She has a man who makes her pay for every little thing, which means that it's a much more of an equal meeting of minds, and what everyone around her is seeing is something that doesn't look like that. And that's just, they don't know what it's like to be Nynaeve because they aren't Nynaeve.
And that's a result of the Sea Folk marriage and the agreements that she made to him.
I think it's a bit also their personalities, but yes, the Sea Folk marriage is a big part of it.
Where she's dominant in public, so he's dominant in private.
Yeah, but I think that to a certain extent that would be their dynamic anyway, because he's a warder, she's an Aes Sedai. That's just kind of their personalities. The Sea Folk marriage just made it legally binding, which I don't agree with. But.
Right. And I guess if at any point he became dominant in public, she would be dominant in private. It's just that's never going to happen because of the Aes Sedai warder relationship.
Right. The Sea Folk customs should not be applied to Aes Sedai because the Sea Folk customs are meant to handle a changing dynamic. For it to be applied to a static relationship, I think I've said this on the podcast before, like, that's just wrong. It's not right. It's not culturally correct. It's not practical, but here we are.
So the next bit is some Min interaction with Rand. I didn't have a lot in there that we haven't talked about already.
Oh, the one thing I did want to talk, referring back to Hyperlexia, when Min sets one of her books aside, it's not that she's getting rid of it. That's the one she means to read in transit. I'm like, Min, my library girl, Min, my hyperlexic nerd. Yes.
The rest of them are getting packed. Yeah.
I really like that. Oh, no. She's setting that aside because she will be bored on the bus ride for 5 minutes and will need something to read. Like,
And Min is very smart, right? And I think that her lack of formal education covers that up, but she is reading these books at a prodigious rate. She's basically giving herself a graduate level education on the side in a couple of years.
and the only reason she was able to do that, because she didn't have the internet, is because she got Master Fell's library and is able to go to the 500 level books with every rabbit hole. I mean, she's doing the Wikipedia falling down the rabbit hole thing, but in a world with no internet. It wouldn't be possible if she hadn't got any scholars library to pilfer, which I love for her. I love it for her so much.
No, it's fun to see her become an academic.
Yeah.
From, the server to academic is something I think we've all seen a lot. Know a lot of people who went from, working in a being a waiter or waitress or a cook and going back to grad school and being like, I need to get out of this lifestyle. I'm going to educate myself and do something completely different with my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the few like hobby activities that Min and Rand can really have. So yeah, you bet she's reading every second she can get.
Mm-hmm. We saw Rand doing a lot of reading earlier. We don't see him so much now. I think doesn't have the time to do the reading, and he sort of like would love to, but he's passed that on to Min, and she's the one doing.
Right, but they can still like talk shop about it, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So he'd be like, "Remember that thing that you read 6 months ago? Well, now I'm reading it." Like, or I'm assuming they're having that conversation because they can't be fucking all the time. Like,
right. Well. They are both young teenagers who are pillow talk. So about cleansing the source,
right?
I don't know,
but
you just cleansed my. Never mind.
Cleanse my tent, baby.
Yeah. I just realized that the cleansing of the source is very sexual. You create a flower opening with the female half of the source, and you force a shaft of the male power through it, and that's what separates the taint. I'm just saying, I just had this realization. I was like, I don't know if this is something that is common.
The raging disappointment emanating off of me in chat right now. Oh my god, that's awful. No, you're right though.
But that's what Jordan's doing. But I'm right. But like that's absolutely what Jordan is doing with the female and male half of the source. He's making a vagina and penis in the sky.
I mean, it tracks with the way he gendered the magic. So you're absolutely right. You're not making a joke. You're not reading between the lines. That's just literally what he did. Robert.
I mean, vagina in the loosely, he's creating a flower, he describes it as a flower in the sky, and Georgia O'Keeffe has made the parallel between flowers and vaginas pretty obvious in art.
Oh my God. But no, I mean, it's sometimes the only way to clear up a situation is to just have sex through it. That's clearly the takeaway.
Some other people are saying it's more of a butthole than a vagina, but I'll let you. We're cleansing the taint here. It could be either one. That is the taint, and the taint, of course, being the between the butthole and the vagina. Like it works too well. Oh my God. Okay. It's too much. It's too much.
I'll be sending along digital bleach with this episode, so you can all wipe your desktops from that. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. So you said LTT had a good quote.
At this point, I've tried to bring this line up so many times and been derailed. Like, all right. So we get a really good LTT line here before we change perspectives one last time for the chapter, which is, "We are dead men. Dead men should be quiet in their graves, but they never are." Right.
LTT being a dead man saying that, who Rand is told to shut up multiple times. Oh, great quote.
It's so meta. It's so creepy. It's so indicative of how Rand and LTT are coming closer together. Like, dead men should be quiet in their graves, but they are in fact walking around as the dragon reborn with a voice in his head. So that's fun. And this is also when Rand realizes that he can draw photorealistic sketches of these guys because Lews Theron could. And then he realizes that that doesn't even scare him anymore because, quite frankly, he's getting tired of all this bullshit and is ready for the last battle. Let's be real.
Right. Well, and it's the skill transfer, right? Like, we've seen it with channeling, right? Where he's gotten the ability to channel things he could never have channeled before because LTT channeled them. Lews Theron, Telamon, channeled them. And now we're seeing the similar skill transfer over to things that aren't channeling based.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's one thing if it's channeling, right? Because channeling's how the madness arrives. So cool. It's all self-contained. But when it escapes containment into the rest of your life, which, like, we've had, like, the body mannerisms. But tugging your earlobe and humming when you look at a pretty girl is not the same thing as, like, artistic talent at all.
No, there's a difference between a habit and a skill. And he's just creating a skill out of nothing. Acquiring a skill out of nothing through, and that's what tells us that, I think when people are like, well, the madness is just all in his head, it can't be because he's getting skills, he's getting knowledge that is real and true, and he's acquiring that. It's not just madness, it's actually a hole in the barrier between him and his previous life. But just in terms of skills and abilities, not in terms of, like, he's not actually talking to LTT or talking to Lews Theron across time.
Right, yeah. Anyway, Isom is a person who's coming out of thin air.
Yes.
And it seems like he can pick who he is in which world, which I feel like I got convinced myself that wasn't true before, but...
It does get confusing because we almost always see Isom in Teleron Riyadh and Luke in the real world, right? Especially around Perrin, right? Because we saw Lord Luke, who was doing all that stuff in the Two Rivers. And he always looked like Isom in the Wolf Dream because Perrin didn't recognize him as Lord Luke. And so I think it's very easy to establish a pattern of, oh, he's Lord Luke in the real world and Isom in the Wolf Dream. This is the first time, I think, that people realize that he's making a choice every time he comes into the... And I think there's I think I had a headcanon that maybe he can only change when he's either entering or exiting Teleron Riyadh.
That would make sense.
Or he can only change, like, in Teleron Riyadh. He can't actually change in the real world. He has to enter Teleron Riyadh, make the change, and then exit back out again.
So he could change however he wants in the dream, back and forth.
Right. But then my assumption is he can't change in the real world. He has to be in Teleron Riyadh to make the change.
So he could probably flick into Teleron Riyadh, change, and come back in, like, a heartbeat, and so effectively change in place.
Right. So it's effectively instant. Yeah. That would be an interesting, because it says here, as he stepped out of the unseen world into the waking world, as he did, he became Luke. It seemed appropriate, right? So it seems to be a transition that happens as he transitioned from the real world from the dream world to the real world.
Just because it's so fundamental with the souls thing. It's not like it's just changing his appearance. It's like a true changing of self. I was also wondering what powers he doesn't have in Teleron Riyadh that the Chosen do. Because he thinks he can't use it as the Chosen do. And I'm like, it's just a weave, I'm
assuming they channel. Well, and I think that he doesn't realize that. He's not on that level, right? He still thinks channeling is something that can help you manipulate Teleron Riyadh.
That would track, especially because he kills wolves rather than learning from them, and he runs away from nightmares rather than learning to kill them. So it would make sense that he's like, oh, well, clearly people with the power are stronger, and it's not just a weave, it's the power. Dun, dun, dun.
Right.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's just Perrin's wolfy, autistic lack of giving a shit about the rules. He's just like, it's just a weave, whatever, it's fine.
Nobody told me I couldn't do that. What's the problem? It's like, what? Like, what do you mean? It's like, you can change all sorts of things about the one power in Teleron Riyadh, and Perrin realizes that, but I don't think Slayer does.
That makes sense. Channelers are just so other and so extra that, of course, a lowly dark friend hybrid experiment couldn't match it.
Well, and that's what he wants, right? That's what Luke and Isam went to the Dark One. They both, well, Luke especially wanted to learn to channel. Isam just wanted to be more powerful, I think. But Luke wanted to channel. And so the Dark One said, I can't give you that ability. What I can do is give you a merged soul, which gives you access to Teleron Riyadh.
Yeah, so his whole perspective on Teleron Riyadh is this is the second best to channeling. So of course he's not going to consider channeling to be something he can do or equal. That's so limiting of him. So limited for himself.
So yeah, he pops in to this room and stabs 2 people with poison daggers. Any idea who these 2 are?
No. I'm assuming people that got put into the hotel room that Lan and Nynaeve were sleeping in. So literally random civilians that have nothing to do with anything.
Oh, you think it's Lan and Nynaeve? I thought it was supposed to be Rand and Min.
Either way, my rationale stands that these are random people who were literally put into the room that was just vacated by our party skedaddling. But I had never once considered that it was Rand and Min. I always assumed that the targets were Lan and Nynaeve. Wow.
Because he says...
His nephew and the wench.
But this is as Luke thinking this. The next sentence is he became Isam.
Oh, shit. I always think of this character as Isam primarily because that's how we mainly interact with him, with Perrin. But you're right. When he's Luke, he's Luke. That means he's Luke. That means he's not... I have been misreading this entire passage wrong the whole time. But I still think my rationale for who these 2 people are is the same. They're random travelers that got put into that room for the night because the party left.
Also, Isam is cousin of Lan Mandragoran. Luke is uncle to Rand al'Thor. So by saying to kill my nephew, it's gotta be referring to Rand, not Lan.
I clearly don't read these books with enough of attention to detail.
No, you don't. Really.
Hack and a fraud.
You don't pay any attention. But yeah, the relationship, particularly as a nephew, would indicate that it's Luke and Rand because that's cousins with Isam.
All right. Well, so this is the real reason why Rand felt the need to move everyone away from the inn is because Ta'Veren was like, yeah, out of thin air is going to be a problem. We need to throw some just random poor people that just were like, oh, we want to stay at this nice inn. The room was just vacated. How convenient. And then they wake up dead.
I mean, in fairness, they woke up stabbed repeatedly with poison daggers, and then they died.
That'd be a really nasty way to die.
Oh, yeah. I feel like I've seen that in like mobster movies too, where people wake up with like a gun in their face, like, wait, no, and then they get shot, you know? Like that second of like, I'm going to die now. That's not good.
That's not a moment I like quite as much as the using other people as body shields moment. It's a classic trope of a moment, but less of my favorite.
No, less fun. It makes you feel bad for some reason.
But Slayer is a person who should make you feel bad because he's like, I want to see the faces of the people I killed. If I can't watch them die, I at least want to see the corpses after. Like he's some serial killer bullshit.
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally fanatical murderer. And we actually get him admitting to the murders that have happened throughout the books in several cases where we never had a suspect until this little 2-page thing where he takes credit for killing 2 Aes Sedai in the Stone of Tyr, which were Amika and Joya.
Yep. The tongues nailed to the door. That's what that was. Right.
The 2 dark friends who were absolutely killed. So we get definitive proof that he did those murders way back then. And we also get definitive proof that he killed the Gray Man in the White Tower who tried to kill, Nynaeve and...
Egwene. When they were rushing around, running into Shiriam, all of that event. Yeah.
That whole thing where Shiriam was suspect as a dark friend. And, she didn't question who killed the Gray Man.
And she didn't question it because she knew dark friendery, not because she knew Slayer, per se.
Probably. I think that's the conclusion we came to, is, She just kind of assumed it was Dark Friendery, but yeah.
Yeah. An agent of the Dark One fixed it for me. Yay.
Right.
And chat has followed up with a literal quote from Jordan that we're right. The two people Slayer kills are simply a couple who had the misfortune to rent a room that somebody thought was still occupied by Rand and Min. It's a verbatim Jordan quote. Thank you, chat.
And I believe that's happening in the Farmatting Inn that they just
that's what just happened.
It's not like it's some other place that's...
Yeah, no, exactly. It's got to be the room that they were literally in that morning. But yeah, it's fun to get those resolutions on those murders because, like, who could have done it? Who could have done it? Well, the answer is Deus Ex Machina. That's why nobody could figure out who did it. It was because nobody had the mechanics for understanding that this guy could pop out of thin air and kill people. So, of course, we didn't think of that.
So there's some interesting things going on with orders for Slayer, right? So Moradin has standing orders for Slayer to kill Padan Fain. That's why he was in the Two Rivers in the first place, right? Because he knew Fain was there. That's been his orders ever since, books and books and books ago.
Presumably more or less since Fain went rogue, which would have been like book 2, book 3, somewhere around there.
Yeah. I'm kind of assuming at least ever since Moradin came back from the dead.
Yeah, at least since then. Possibly sooner, but at least since then for sure.
So this is a diversion. One of the Forsaken, one of the Chosen, is appearing to Slayer and pulling him off task to go try and kill Rand. Now, we've had 3 people who just said, I want to go kill Rand. Taim, Demandred, Moradin. We're assuming it's not Moradin because Moradin already has Slayer working for him and wouldn't appear in disguise, which this Forsaken has.
Yeah, really cool disguise, too. The voice melts in the ears, so you can't remember the voice. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming it's not Taim, because I don't think he's really technically Forsaken yet. And I don't think he would have the resources to track down Slayer and give him commands.
Yeah, and I don't think he's technically proficient enough with the power to do this definitely Age of Legends style thing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, this is definitely old school Forsaken. That kind of, again, leaves me with Demandred, who was also mentioned earlier in the chapter, and who also we don't know what the hell we're doing. I think the person who is commanding Slayer right now is Demandred. Other possibilities, Halima could technically appear as male in Teleron Riyadh, but I don't think they would bother.
It doesn't seem like a thing Halima would be doing.
No, I feel like Halima's embraced the gender transition and is now just like...
Well, and is focused on Egwene. Like, very focused on having fun and messing with Egwene. Like, this whole thing with Rand is way not what she's caring about. I think you're right that Demandred is... He fits the bill better than anyone else. I don't think... To Chat's question, I don't think it's Shaidar Haran, because that's not...
Shaidar Haran doesn't channel
powers.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't have that kind of melt the voice out of your ears power. So Demandred fits, or someone like Grandal.
Right.
Going
totally
full,
right.
I'm pretending to be Demandred in disguise or something like that.
And then Deshiva's, we don't know where Deshiva is. So is it possible that Deshiva's doing this right now? Possible. I think Deshiva's too much of a fucking coward. But Deshiva did try and kill Rand.
I mean...
And Deshiva would know about this sort of thing, and he would want to hide.
I could see Deshiva being like, I failed to attack him when I had the fearsome foursome at my back. What if I send in the scary guy instead? I could see that. That would fit the facts as well, assuming that Osengar has the wherewithal to actually do that and the resources to actually get in touch with Slayer. Because we don't know how hard it is to get in touch with Slayer. And Demandred seems to have a lot more resources than the, very nearly demoted, completely out of the ranks Forsaken.
Fire Phoenix just posted an interview with Maria Simmons.
Oh.
And in the interview, she implies it was Taim.
Oh.
Someone says, I always thought it was Taim, and Maria Simmons kind of agrees with them and says, yeah, I know that one.
Huh. So Taim is diverting Slayer from his Fane mission to kill Rand. And that has to have been a very recent development because Taim hasn't really been, badass enough to count as a proto-Forsaken until very recently.
That we know of, right? There's a lot of education. We don't know what Taim knows. Taim was taught, we assume, by Demandred, assuming he's not actually is Demandred. But there was a certain amount of teaching. He was freed, and it took him a while to reappear back on the scene. And we assume there was tutelage going on during that time. And he was learning a lot of advanced techniques. And really, Mirror of the Mists isn't that hard to pull off, right? So... Taim was definitely on the list, right? He's one of the two possibilities. And again, this is where Taim and Demandred are always so fucking closely linked to each other, where it's like it's hard to really separate them out because how much of it is Jordan was writing them as one character, and how much of it is they just tend to fill the same. They tend to be on the same page because they're allies trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And Taim is Demandred's agent in Randland. Well, he's off in Shara.
That does all track very well, actually.
It's tough. And the disguise, it does seem that Demandred would just order him to do it. He's not scared of Moradin in the same way that Taim would be. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. Also, a good reason to hide the identity, right? If it's the new Forsaken that hasn't yet had his unveiling, like being like, no, it's just one of the Forsaken, like that keeps that ace up the sleeve a little bit.
Right. And also, if Slayer knew it was one of the Forsaken, but it was a new Forsaken, he might be like, fuck you, you're not Forsaken. Like, I have no, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
So I think there is still a little bit of a debate to be had. Maria Simmons saying that she knew it was Taim, though, does kind of button that up.
Yeah, and also when he leaves, the gateway opens into a snowy forest glade. Feels more like Andor than Shara.
That does feel like the Black Tower, like outside the Black Tower, rather than Shara, which is going to be much more tropical.
I mean, Shara's a big country, so like presumably there's snow there, but we know Andor is covered in snow right now.
That is a good point. That is a really good point.
That plus Maria says it, I think that's solid.
Yeah. I think that's solid on Taim. Yep.
Yeah. We can still say it's a bit of Tame and Dread. We can still bring that Tame and Dread vibe to
it. Right. Is it Taim? Is it Tame and Dread? Or is it Taim working on the orders of Demandred? They're all kind of the same thing.
Yes.
The pair sleeping in this room will sleep forever, Luke said. But the man was bald, the woman gray. A pity, the man said, and the voice seemed to melt in Luke's ears. He would not be able to recognize it if he heard it without the disguise. The man had to be one of the Chosen. Few save the Chosen knew how to reach him, and none of the men among those few who could channel, or would have dared trying to command him. His services were always begged, except by the Great Lord himself, and more recently by the Chosen. But none of the Chosen Luke had met had ever taken such precautions as this. So that makes sense that he's not one of the Chosen, because none of the Chosen that he had met, so it would be the new one who would take the precaution.
Yep.
It's really falling together. Do you want me to try again, Luke asked. Perhaps when I tell you, not before. Remember, not a word of this to anyone. As you command, Luke replied, bowing, but the man was already making a gateway, a hole that opened into a snowy forest glade. He was gone before Luke straightened. It really was a pity. He had rather looked forward to killing his nephew and the wench, but if there was time to pass, hunting was always a pleasure. He became Isam. Isam liked killing wolves even more than Luke did.
Such a sinister line. And there we go. Another chapter down.
That was a good one. There was a lot of reveal in that chapter. If you were reading this when the books came out in order, there's a lot of things that made you go, that's what was going on, right? Like,
yeah,
just a lot of answers in this chapter for me.
Definitely a chapter that Spoilers was reaching forward to reference many times.
Many times, yeah. The number of times we're like, well, and Slayer did it, and how do we know? Well, there's this POV in Winter's Heart where he admits to it, and that's there's at least 2 significant murders where we're like, we know that Slayer because of this chapter.
Yeah. So this is one of those chapters that really justifies the spoilers approach.
Right.
Which is funny, given that it was a chapter with a lot of action in it. Like, there was pages of just sword fight and running through the city. It's funny that chapter should also have so much plot.
But I really like when Jordan pairs active plot and action with thoughts in somebody's heads that gives us answers. And I think that's what he does here. So we get a lot of information from Rand and from Rochide and Kisben, and even from Slayer, right? We just get a lot of information because we're in their heads, and we don't usually get to be in the heads of bad guys. All right, well, thanks for joining us again. This was a lot of fun. I like this. I like that chapter a lot.
Yeah, that was really fun. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us for this spoiler-tastic chapter. And remember to, follow us and like us on social media or whatever.
Well, and just to call out, hey, still support us on Patreon. We're still making these episodes. We still appreciate any, money that you're willing to donate. It's really, really helpful to be able to keep going on this. And, I know we haven't said thank you in a little bit, but thank you to all the patrons who have continued to donate and continue to make this possible.
Yeah, really, really appreciate you guys. It's a lovely vote of confidence, as well as keeping our overhead manageable. So thank you all very, very much, and we will see you next time.
I always think of Kisman as Kingsman.
Yeah.
And that's that movie that just came out, right? That it's like an ultra-violent movie about gunfighting.
Yes. I do believe I saw a trailer.
Right, and I shouldn't say just came out. I should say came out 5 to 10 years ago, because my sense of time. 2015 was when the original came out. So 7 years ago. And they've done a bunch of sequels. And it's just, super hyper-violent British gunfighting. There's a scene in the beginning where everybody in a church gets brainwashed into killing each other.
Oh, wow.
And, they're just normal people who are just decided that they're going to try and kill each other as much as possible. And this one guy is a, Secret Service agent who also gets caught up in it. And so since he's, a better killer than everybody else, he just goes fucking ham on these innocent people who are trying to kill him. It's super bloody, super rough. Sort of a little bit of a little more realistic James Bond type situation. I don't a little more bloody James Bond.
Yeah, if there's going to be guns and cars and stuff, I really like my violence fantastical. I only like realism if it's going to be a period piece. If you're going to give me guns and stuff, I want it to be slick and fancy and gritty is not my jam. Which, oh man, guys, if what I just said sounds like your speed, you should go watch Warrior Nun. 'Cause that is fun. That's not gritty at all. That's just cool, glowy stuff. And I mean, I'm only 2 episodes in, but the slickness of the violence is very much what is appealing about it for me. Also, it's a bunch of
again?
Warrior Nun. It's called Warrior Nun. It's a fun action romp thing. It's got 2 seasons out, and people are currently campaigning to get Netflix to not kill it like they kill everything good.
Well, it's had its 2 seasons. It needs to die.
Yeah, but if you want kick-ass nuns with slightly futuristic guns, just being a weird mix of medieval and modern and not at all gritty. That's fun. Go give that a spin. Lots of hot chicks kicking ass. It's not a bad time.
Okay, so we turned on recording because we were talking about hyperlexia, which is something that I was not familiar with as a term, but something I am familiar with as a process or an ability.
Yeah, so, in light of everyone, you'll all have just heard the last episode last week where I go off about unmasking autism. Still reading the book, still crying about it, so I have to take it slowly. But then I spent all morning on TikTok. reading, going down the TikTok rabbit hole about this stuff, and I came across a person who was specifically making a playlist about hyperlexia and talking about all the different variations of it. And this is something that Seth and I have talked about repeatedly, which is that we are actually pretty mediocre spellers, despite the fact that we read a bunch, because we see words as complete discrete units, not as a series of letters. And that was something that I've never seen explained anywhere except in me explaining my own experience. But this playlist about hyperlexia was like, that's a thing.
And that tends to be people reading much quicker than you would if you're looking at every single letter, because you don't need to recognize every single letter. You recognize words or even chunks of words as phrases. Yeah, whole sentences. You can really just look at them and read them without... recently had my 2-year anniversary with Never, and she gave me a card and she wrote, on both pages a pretty extensive note, and at the end of it she says, and this had better have taken you more than 30 seconds to read. and so I got to the end of it and I laughed and I handed it to her and I was like, wait, did you keep track? She's like, yeah, I counted. It took you 11 seconds to read both those. And I was like, she's like, it should have taken you at least a minute,
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I read about 3 times faster than almost everyone I've ever met, except for my mom, my dad, and a handful of Wheel of Time fans. That's literally the only people, and like one person in college. Everyone else reads at a snail's pace compared to me, and that's the normal people.
It's so slow. Yeah.
Like
so slow.
And then there's people who are slow at reading, where it's just like, I would rather gouge my eyes out with a rusty spoon than read alongside you, because I will have read both pages 15 times by the time you are done with page 1. Not even, I have fucking counted. It is painful.
My dad is a slow reader. He can only read at the space that he can read out loud. That's the fastest he can read, because he's basically reading out loud in his head.
Yeah, and when I was a kid and we had to do the reading out loud in class, because apparently that's how neurotypical children are supposed to learn to read, I got so much scolding because I couldn't read slow enough. Because I was trying to read at the speed in my head, which is like literally like 2x chipmunk speed.
Right.
So like it was a whole skill to learn how to read slow enough to like pass this stupid fucking social ritual that everyone apparently goes through in school, even people that go to private hippie schools.
Yep, same. I think that One Wheel of Time has a lot of hyperlexias in its fan base, because I think that helps you get through it. Also, it's like, oh, this is enough material for me to actually concentrate on for an extended period of time. So I don't blow through it all in one afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that I can see why the fan base has a high sample rate of that kind of person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, it's just, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Yeah. Brains are stupid fascinating.
At the same time, I went to type recipe the other day. I was like, I have no idea how to spell the word recipe.
That's what autocorrect's for. It's very simple.
Well, at work, I have this system that I have to enter data into that doesn't have a spell checker on it. But it's also seen by all of my bosses and everybody else around me. So it's very, very...
Oh, dear.
Stressful when I type into it. Now, fortunately, it's usually the same, they're usually status updates, which are the same most of the time. And, there's a lot of jargon involved. So a lot of abbreviations and stuff like that. So it's not too bad, but every once in a while I have to type in a longer message. And oh my God, the number of times I've gone back and read my little notes and been like, okay, you spelled that word wrong, and that word wrong. Great.
Isn't it amazing how good we are at catching typos, but we're also really good at making them? So frustrating. I'm actually pretty bad at catching typos, except when I'm not. But I'm not good at it. I'm just not.
Oh, I'm terrible at catching my own typos, because I know what I meant to say. But it's really difficult to do that, to proofread your own material for me, anyway. Whereas I can proofread somebody else's, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. There's clearly something wrong here. And then you catch a typo, or this word isn't spelled right.
I can do pretty well with my own writing if it's 48 hours later. There's enough distance between me and the headspace of writing it that I'm sometimes able to look for typos. But yeah, it's much easier with other people's stuff. I
never understood how to do drafts in high school. That was one of those things where I never I couldn't edit my own stuff because I knew what I meant. So I just write a paper, and that was the first and final draft at the same time. I'm sure it drove my teachers absolutely insane. They must have hated that.
Yeah, I never had a problem with drafts. I have a problem with wanting to do too many drafts. But yeah. But my spelling has been going down the toilet ever since I've learned that autocorrect will just clean up after me. Like, at this point, it's been 10 years of me just being like, fuck it, fling words at the keyboard and it'll get figured out in post. And I'm a very bad speller when it comes to handwriting as a result. I have a great handwriting, but only the spelling that's managed to stick at this point after not being forced to maintain those skills.
It's amazing how if you don't practice something, you either lose it or, you don't advance any further. And it seems obvious, but it's like one of those things when I was a kid, I was like, if I lived forever, I'd just be getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And now I want to write a book about someone who lives forever and is exactly the same way as an old person is, where they just sit on their couch and watch TV and haven't learned anything new and are just as ignorant and just as dumb. They just happen to have been like 500 years old.
That is
They've actually like forgotten a bunch of stuff and like don't even have basic skills anymore.
That is bleak, my friend.
They're like, what is this new ring dial tone phone thing that you guys are working on? I like to talk to people the old-fashioned way, face to face.
Oh my god.
Or like they learned they're like, no, listen, when the telegraph came out, I learned Morse code. Now it's outdated and I refuse to update my skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Still uses a fax machine.
Well, I'm learning how to use ham radio, so it's full circle hipster status over here. We've got a record player, and I've got a 2-meter.
That's all about nostalgia. So I guess that's where the person could just be waiting for the skills to come back into effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about picking really stable forms of technology to get stuck on,
Right.
None of this newfangled, complicated moving parts shit. You got to find the stuff that's going to stick, like sewing machines, record players, ham radio, like bicycles, like gizmos, not so much. More efficient ways of moving, yes.
So, and this is what I'm saying, like, to us, those are very stable, very normal things that have been around forever. But to someone who's like been around for a couple thousand years, those would be the newfangled bicycle was only invented a couple hundred years ago, right? Like,
okay, I guess the wheel.
Okay, if you want to stick with the wheel, that's fine. That one I know how to use. Yeah,
or that's one of the fun things I love about cooking is how much of it is like people have been doing exactly this for like ever, like certain tasks, like making bread, right? Like people have been mixing water and flour and yeast and salt and shoving it into a hot space for like thousands upon thousands of years, like these basic actions.
Even when they didn't know what yeast was.
Right. Totally. And like cutting up food is like one of the most valuable possessions I have is a piece of steel. Just this triangle of steel is one of the most valuable possessions I have because I use it multiple times a day to feed myself. Like, that's one of the most fundamental parts of cooking is just cutting stuff up. And it's like a good knife. Like, our Neolithic ancestors would look at that knife and be like, cool, that looks helpful. Maybe a little flimsy for our purposes, but like pretty awesome, right? Like, they would recognize it. Some things don't change. So knives and wheels.
Our stainless steel would be like magic to them.
Oh my God. Yeah. And they would know exactly what to do with it. Same with lighters or matches.
Right.
Like that does not take explanation. Like if you have a lighter in your pocket, like all your Neolithic ancestors are so proud of you because you have fire. You can just instantly make fire wherever you go. Like most of our ancestors have never had that. They would instantly be like, oh, fuck.
One of my favorite genres is someone who like time travels or travels to another universe with like a lighter in their pocket and like a basic pocket knife and maybe a few textbooks in the trunk of their car. And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, I can change the entire path of this civilization over the next few centuries simply by introducing some knowledge real early.
There's a very good book called The Time Ships that you would like if you have not read it.
Okay.
Have you ever read Stephen Baxter? He's written a bunch of sci-fi, like bunches and bunches.
No.
Okay, well, he's a really cool author. I like a lot of his stuff. Everything of his I've read. The handful of things I've read I've liked. But this book is a sequel to H.G. Wells' The Time Machine.
Oh,
and
okay.
it starts out exactly where the book leaves off. Like, exactly. Like, it gets you right back in the saddle. You feel like you're in H.G. Wells's book. And then about 5-10 pages in, we're not in Kansas anymore. And it's amazing. And so many twists and turns. And it's all around that nubbin of the idea that because the time traveler came back and left his account, things changed. And the divergence of multiverse things, and it's all because of the book. It's very fourth wall meta and lovely. And if you like that concept, I definitely recommend Stephen Baxter's take on that idea, because he plays with it multiple times throughout the plot. He doesn't just do it once. He's like, no. I'm taking on H.G. Wells. I am running with this.
Joel Rosenberg writes a D&D parallel universe. A bunch of college kids start playing D&D. Turns out their DM is a real wizard and transports them into the world of D&D that they came from. And they go, and one of the things is everything sort of gets translated. It goes through a translator to become, so you become your character that you've rolled, right? But also, like, they had a nice kitchen knife on them that became a very nice katana that was like different than anyone else had ever seen before. And they in one of them they get their car transported through, and in the car, because they're college students, is all their college science textbooks. So they start creating gunpowder and advance technology in a very D&D fantasy swords and magic world. And slavery in that world, which is actually kind of a cool plot line. They discover slavery exists, and they go on a quest to take down the existing order and replace it with a non-slave culture.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and they're short little books. They're these little, what's Guardians of the Flame is the name of the series. Starts with The Sleeping Dragon in 1983.
Nice.
Again, little short books that I consumed as a kid, because they were on the used bookstore shelves for $1 each.
We loved the free used bookshelf. Free or cheap, when you can just grab armloads of stuff for a budget that even a kid can afford. Yeah, that helped us nurture our hyperlexia.
Yeah, it feels like you're pulling books out of thin air.
It does.
Which is the title of this chapter.
Nice. Very nice.
Thanks. I'm going for those transitions.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?